I can only imagine what it will be like when I walk by your side. I can only imagine what my eyes will see when your face is before me. I can only imagine. Yeah,
Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus, or in all of you be still?
Will I stand in your presence, or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak it all? I can only imagine. I can only imagine.
I can only imagine when that day comes and I find myself standing in the sun. I can only imagine when all I will do is forever, forever worship you. I can only imagine, yeah. I can only imagine.
Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus, or in all of you be still?
Will I stand in your presence, or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak it all? I can only imagine, yeah, yeah. I can only imagine.
Yeah, surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus, or in all of you be still?
Will I stand in your presence, or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak it all?
I can only imagine. I can only imagine.
I can only imagine, yeah. I can only imagine.
I can only imagine. Yeah, yeah. I can only imagine. I can only imagine when all I would do is forever, forever worship you. I can only imagine.
Welcome. Thanks for joining. Who we got in the house tonight? We've got a bunch of people on Periscope. Thanks so much for joining. We have JR in the house. JR's in the house. We have Angel Love. Thank you so much for joining. Guys, thanks for pumping the hearts. Who's there? Gary's here. It looks like progressing. Who is that? Is that my screen? Come on. Work with me here, fingers. I see Gary. I see Seeker of the Truth. I see Progressive Pilgrims in the house. How's it going, Adam? Thanks for joining. Blessings from Egypt. Egypt. Wow. That's pretty far away. Melanie, thanks so much for the super hearts. You guys are awesome, and I do thank you. Mary Ellen, how's it going over there on who is singing I Can Only Imagine with me? Who was that? That was a guy named well, it's Heath Broom. So but he's on the Smule app. That's what I sing on. So yeah. Alright. So who am I? I am Jason Wallace. I'm a believer and follower of Jesus Christ. I'm a prayer warrior, an intercessor, a Bible reader. So we'll pray for you. We read the Bible. I'm a devoted husband and father. I am a child of God. These are in the Bible. These are definitely things that you need to understand, right? I can only imagine, right? That one day, amen. I'm a new creation in Christ. I'm a citizen of heaven. I'm a member of Christ's body. It is a pretty nice worship song. I'm a friend of Christ. I'm righteous and holy. It says it right there in the Bible. I'm also a very proud member of the Jesus Did It family. Hey, Seb, thanks for joining. Welcome in, Adam, back again. And alright, guys, so we are streaming John 3:16 is love. That's right, John Burse. Absolutely. And thank you so much for hosting on Mixer. Guys, so tonight, I just want to let you know, we are broadcasting on YouTube, YouNow, Live.me, DLive.io, Periscope, Facebook, Twitch, Smashcast, FC2, Peaks, Mixer, Loots, Instajib, Vaughn Live, Africa TV, OK.ru, and soon, in a minute or two, we'll also be broadcasting on Kitty Live. I don't bring on Live.me and Kitty.live because they don't see this part of this thing. They only see the plain old green screen in the back there. So, and if you guys wanted to get a sample of what it looks like for the other people, hold on. Let me go adjust the filter here. I'll go remove the green screen filter so you can actually see that it looks pretty horrible behind me. If you can't see, it's pretty much green. Green. So, there we go. We put it back, and now we can actually have the pretty stuff behind us. So, it's just an ugly green screen. But for this, we'll be able to put, hey, I'm on the beach. Why not? I'll chill out on the beach. And who is that dot? Is that Gary? That is Gary, isn't it? Gary, yeah, your icon looks similar to someone else's. Yeah, so we're broadcasting on a whole bunch of streams tonight. And thanks so much for doing that. Bible JKVHKJV. Yeah, we read from the New King James Version. But we're not exclusive to that. The verses are extremely similar in most of the translations, and it's just whatever the most you can comprehend, especially if you're just starting to learn, is going to be a place to be, rather than getting stuck into what is all this, hith, hath, thy, thee, those. There's like a whole bunch of different words that Old English that most people these days don't understand too well. So, but yeah, King James Version is okay. Definitely has purpose and practice because it's been around. So, I am a very proud member of the Jesus Did It family, and what does that mean? That means that we got our website. We go to JesusDidIt.org, right? You can download the affirmations. Those are the I am statements right there. So a lot of those I ams, they're there. So download that thing, print it out, put it up on your wall, put it in your, up in your, in your Bible, print it out, and just read one or two of them a day, and get yourself into the Word. Welcome, Jorge. Thanks so much for joining. Alright, and then there's some books and stuff for sale over there if you're interested. All the proceeds of that go back into the ministry. And yeah, get yourself a cool shirt. It's a really good talking point with people as you're walking down the street. And they're going, hey, what's up with that shirt? What does all that mean? All those I ams. And you can sit there and go, well, here, let me show you in the Bible where this means. It's kind of a neat way of doing some, just some witnessing to people through a shirt. It's pretty easy to do. So there's some other great broadcasters that we like to watch down the bottom here. Some really good people like Tommy Norman and Larissa, and I don't know who else is down there. I can't really see. That's really, really small for me. Alright, got my sleepy time. So, sleepy time tea. So we're ready to go to settle down into some word and get into some stuff tonight. Alright, so our singing time. And this is the reason why I don't bring the other guys on, because they can't hear it too good. So that's what we do. So let's bring Smeal on. Let's see what we can pick for a good song for tonight. Hey Diane, thanks so much for joining. I've seen some faces here I haven't seen in a while. Who's that? Sean? How's it going, Sean? How are you? Alright. Okay, so we started off with I Can Only Imagine. Well, let's see how busy I've been. Can't release the Waymaker yet. It's not ready yet. I did this one. I really enjoy. Oh, Sav, are you in the house? Sav here? Sav's not here. I'll blessings. Hey, how's it going? We're gonna do this one. Love. Yes. Sidewalk Prophets. Here we go.
The question was raised as my conscience fell, a silly little lie. It didn't mean much, but it lingers still in the corners of my mind.
Still you call me to walk on the edge of this world, to spread my dreams and fly. But the future's so far, my heart is so frail, I think I'd rather stay inside. But you love me anyway. It's like nothing in life that I've ever known. Yes, you love me anyway. Oh Lord, how you love me, how you love me. It took more than my strength to simply be still, to seek but never find. All the reasons we change, the reasons I doubt, and why do loved ones have to die. But you love me anyway. It's like nothing in life that I've ever known. Yes, you love me anyway. Oh Lord, how you love me. I am a thorn in your crown, but you love me anyway. I am the sweat from your brow, but you love me anyway.
I am the nail in your wrist, but you love me anyway.
I Judas's kiss, but you love me anyway. See, now I'm the man who yelled out from the crowd for your blood to be spilled on this earth-shaking ground.
Yes, then I turned away with this smile on my face, with the sin in my heart. I tried to bury your grace,
and then alone in the night I still called out for you, so ashamed of my life, my life, my life.
but you love me anyway. Oh God, how you love me.
Yes, you love me anyway. It's like nothing in life that I've ever known. Yes, you love me anyway. Oh Lord, how you love me. Yes, you love me. Yes, you love me. Yes, you love me. Yes, you love me.
How you love me.
How you love me. How you love me.
It's amazing, his love for us, right? And it's a real easy equation. Accept him as your Lord and your Savior. Give your life over, right? Give it all over to him. Turn away, repent. Don't get wrapped up into religion and nonsense, right? That's right. Take that evil spirit away. Just call it away, right? We can't live in a place where us as believers, and those who may not be, we can't live in this day of just being lukewarm. I know everybody's probably like, oh, this is like hearing this all the same time, every time. But Jesus said you know, wasn't Jesus, didn't he say that? Was it him? I don't know, come on. Start challenging me. Who said it? Who said you're either hot or you're cold? Can't be warm. So all I can do is spit it out. Can't do nothing with hot water. Can't do nothing with cold water. Right? So, think about that. We want to be hot for Christ, but what we don't want to do is we don't want to be confused about that and wrapping it and twisting it and making it into something that it isn't. You know? I'm pretty sure Jesus said it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did too. Revelation 3, you got it. So, you know, if you, oh, it's gonna be harsh. I'm gonna wait on that one. All I'm saying is be careful who you're following, right? You can't go to heaven lukewarm. That's right. Be careful who you're following, who's speaking into your ear and into your eyes, and what their view is, right? And listen, double check the stuff against the Bible. And if you don't know, don't. You know what I mean? Like, starting to come to some revelations lately that there's a lot of people who talk really, really good religion and really, really good things that they do, right? But it smells sweet. It tastes good. It looks like the the Pepsi Cola or Coca Cola, if you like Coca Cola, of religion, and you're drinking this crap in, and it's not doing you good at all. So let's think about that. I'm gonna do another song. Walk in the fruits of the Holy Spirit. Well, Sev still here? Or did he walk out again? I'm not gonna play a song if he's not here. I see him popping in, popping out. FCFWBC. Not quite sure I know what that means. Maybe I'm just confused, but we can Google search that one. Let's see what it means. United. What does that say? United something. FCFWBC. Is that your church? Alright. Okay, so let's find a song. I can't do Sev's song. Who am I? Who am I? Why do I deserve his love? I feel that sometimes this world gives you these thoughts that you have to put labels on yourself. And really the only label we need to know is that we are God's child. That's the only label we need.
Who am I that the Lord of all the earth would care to know my name, care to feel my hurt? Who am I that the bright and morning star would choose to light the way for my ever-wandering heart? Not because of who I am, but because of what you've done. Not because of what I've done, but because of who you are. I am a flower quickly fading in a day and gone tomorrow, a wave tossed in the ocean, a vapor in the wind. Still you hear me when I'm calling. Lord, you catch me when I'm falling, and you told me who I am. I am yours. I am yours. Who am I that the eyes that see my sin would look on me with love and watch me rise again? Who am I that the voice to calm the sea would call out through the rain and calm the storm in me? Not because of who I am, but because of what you've done. Not because of what I've done, but because of who you are. I am a flower quickly fading, here today and gone tomorrow, a wave tossed in the ocean, a vapor in the wind. Still you hear me when I'm calling, and catch me when I'm falling. Told me who I am. not because of who I am, but because of what you've done. Not because of what I've done, but because of who you are. I am a flower quickly fading, here today and gone tomorrow, a wave tossed in the ocean, a vapor in the wind. Still you hear me when I'm calling, Lord, you catch me when I'm falling, and you've told me who I am. I am yours. I am yours. I am yours. Whom shall I fear? Whom shall I fear? 'Cause I am yours. I am yours.
That's right, man. Just pray for your family. What's going on, AJ? Good Tuesday, Blake. How are you doing, my friend? Listen, it's not because of me. It's not because of what I've done. It's what he's done. That's one thing we need to really, really focus on. Is what he's done. Because I didn't like the old man. The old man that was me was not a good person. And I don't ever want to see that person again. I only want to see, when I look in the mirror, I want to see a reflection of Jesus. You know, not necessarily the looks, because, you know what I'm talking about. In my actions, in what I do, and how I do it. And how I focus on what he has, right? Because I can't. Sev in the house yet? Is that no? That's JR, right? That's JR. Warden. There you go, Blake. Thanks for joining back in again. All right. You know. Yeah, I sang a couple non-Christian songs, guys. Don't get too crazy. Alright. Let's do, that's who he says I am. Not everyone is transformed. Everybody's transformed in their own way. There may be similarities, but the only constant there is Jesus. The rest of the story is yours, right? Do you need help in your business?
That the highest
King
would welcome me. I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am.
Free at last he has ransomed me, his grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me.
Yes, he died for me. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am.
I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am who you say I am. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
In my Father's house, there's
Sev,
a
stick around.
place for me.
I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
Amen. It's such a privilege to be loved by Him. And what He does for us each and every day. I'm so grateful for everything He does.
I am chosen.
Praise Jesus. Thank you so much. I'm
Chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. Oops.
You are for me.
I'm like double singing the song here.
I am who you say I am.
I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Yes, I am who you say I am. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Amen. Thanks for joining.
God bless you, brother. Have a great. Sorry about double singing the song there. Sev, you're in the house. Sev's in the house. Sev's here. Sev, should I play our song that we sang? Should I? Should I? Should I? Should I? What do you think? Did I lose comments? I can't see comments. Alright, well. Sev invited me to sing a song, so I did. So here we go. There we go. Alright, this time I won't double sing the song.
What's up, guys? Let's praise Jesus.
Amen.
You hear me when I call. You are my morning song. Though darkness fills the night, it cannot hide the light. Whom shall I fear?
You crush the enemy underneath my feet. You are my sword and shield. Though troubles linger still, whom shall I fear?
I know who goes before me, I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side.
The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side.
My strength is in your name, for you alone can save. You will deliver me, yours is the victory.
Whom shall I fear?
Whom shall I fear? I know who goes before me, I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. And nothing formed against me shall stand. You hold the whole world in your hands. I'm holding on to your promises. You are faithful.
You are faithful.
You are faithful. I know who goes before me, I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side.
The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side.
I know who goes before me, I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The God of angel armies is always by my side. God bless each and every one of you. Please join. Stay blessed in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, I just got told that there was no sound on YouNow again. I don't quite understand that app. It works, it doesn't work. Let's see, can I hear myself? Hello, can I hear myself?
Hello, can I hear myself?
There, I can hear myself, so we're good. I guess I have to check it on every broadcast just to make sure. Yes, absolutely, Sev. So let's bring Kitty Live on, and let's bring Live.me on, and let's get into some stuff. Alright, so done. Go live. 3, 2, 1. It takes a little snapshot of you when you do that, so gotta do it. Same thing with Live.me. There we go. Alright, welcome. Thanks for coming in, guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being on the broadcast. And it's warm up here tonight in the old studio. That's what you want to call it. So let's go pull in our our Bible. Let's go get into some word. This is, as Pastor Rick says, this is the point where I start losing people. But that's alright. We worshipped. That is the most important, right? Now, the most important is getting into his word. But, but our importance is also to worship God as well. And read the word so we can understand him and worship him, because he needs and desires and deserves that. Certainly. We can pray for Sarah. Lord, we lift up Sarah tonight, Lord. And hey, welcome. Thanks for joining over there on Kitty Live. Lord, we just lift up Sarah today. We just ask for healing in her body. Lord, from this sleep and dizziness, ringing in the left ear, and the throat, and the acid reflux. Lord, we just ask that you take that away. In Jesus' mighty and powerful name. Lord, let there be a miracle. In Jesus' name. Amen. Alright. So, you just might be right. Thanks for joining on the broadcast. Okay. So, Psalm 107 is the book of the next Psalms, right? This is book 5. It says, Thanksgiving to the Lord for his great works of deliverance. Oh boy. Deliverance. Very interesting. And I just spilled right down my face. It was great. Is new to Live Me. Welcome, Mom's Super Chicken. Thanks for joining. And interesting username. Alright, so an amen is an amens. Let's see what we got going on over here. 1,100 viewers over already on Periscope already. Wow. Alright, let's get into his word. Alright, so thanksgiving to the Lord for his great works of deliverance. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he has redeemed from the hand of the enemy, and gathered out of the lands, from the east and from the west, from the north and from the south. They wandered in the wilderness, in a desolate way. They found no city to dwell in. Hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted on them. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them out of their distresses. And he led them forth by the right way, that they might go to a city for a dwelling place. Oh, that men would give thanks to the Lord for his goodness, and for his wonderful works to the children of men. For he satisfies the longing soul, and fills the hungry soul with goodness. Those who sat in the darkness and in the shadow of death, bound in affliction and irons. Because they rebelled against the words of God, and despised the counsel of the Most High. Therefore, he brought down their heart with labor. They fell down, and there was none to help. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them out of their distresses. He brought them out of the darkness and the shadow of death, and broke their chains in pieces. Oh, that men would give thanks to the Lord for his goodness, and for his wonderful works to the children of men. For he has broken the gates of bronze, and cut the bars of iron in two. Fools, because of their transgressions, and because of their iniquities, were afflicted. Their soul abhorred all manner of food, and they drew near to the gates of death. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them out of their distresses. He sent his word and healed them, and delivered them from their destructions. Oh, what man would give thanks to the Lord for his goodness, and for his wonderful works to the children of men. Let them sacrifice the sacrifices of thanksgiving, and declare his works with rejoicing. Those who go down to the sea in ships, who do business on the great waters, they see the works of the Lord, and his wonders in the deep. For he commands and raises the stormy wind, which lifts up the waves of the sea. They mount up the heavens. What's going on, Carrie? Thanks for joining. They mount up the heavens. They go down again to the depths. Their soul melts because of the trouble. They reel to and fro and stagger like drunken men, and are at their wits' end. Then they cry out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brings them out of their distresses. He calms the storm, so that its waves are still. Just lost? We all are at sometimes. Then they are glad because they are quiet. So he guides them to their desired heaven. Stick around, we'll talk. Oh, that men would give thanks to the Lord for his goodness, and for his wonderful works to the children of men. It was a long one today. Let them exalt him also in the assembly of the people, and praise him in the company of the elders. He turns rivers into a wilderness, and the water springs into dry ground, a fruitful land into barrenness, for the wickedness of those who dwell in it. He turns the wilderness into pools of water, and dry land into water springs. There he makes his hungry dwell. Hey Tracy, thanks for joining. There he makes the hungry dwell. That they may establish a city for a dwelling place, and sow fields and plant vineyards, that they may yield a fruitful harvest. He also blesses them, and they multiply greatly, and he does not let the cattle decrease. When they are diminished and brought low, through oppression, affliction, and sorrow, he pours contempt on princes, and causes them to wander into the wilderness where there is no way. Yet he sets the poor on high, far from affliction, and makes their families like a flock. The righteous see it as rejoice, and all iniquity stops its mouth. Whoever is wise will observe these things, and they understand their loving kindness of the Lord. And there we got the green screen, the green edgy screen over there on Periscope. Whew, Psalm 107 is a long one, and yeah, there's quite a bit of words in there that probably need another read over just to give it. I'm not gonna do it right now, but I'm gonna read it later because I'm feeling some sort of way about the words that were just read there. So yeah, that's woo. So welcome, Carrie. How are you doing? What do you mean you're lost? What's going on? How are you feeling lost? And what's my favorite music album right now? My favorite album, music album. I don't know. I got like lots of songs in my head. I don't know if I got a favorite right now. I really don't know. There's a lot of songs, a lot of music stuck in that brain area. You haven't been yourself lately? I've been that way too. Before. Are you a believer? And what's not yourself? What is your, alright. Well, we're waiting for people to type. Guys, we read from the Our Daily Bread. Our Daily Bread is a free publication. You might be able to get here. You're a huge believer? Awesome. So I'm going to give you a follow, because I tend to follow believers. Awesome. So you haven't been yourself, or you just haven't been, you're like, yeah, we got to figure that part out. So, especially if you're a believer. So, the Our Daily Bread free publication. You might be able to get it at your church. What's going on, Wraith? Thanks so much for joining. Let me fix this phone over here because it is falling down, and I feel like you're being hunted. Hunted? Phone sliding down. Don't move, phone. Alright. I feel like you're being hunted. Haunted. Oh. Well, I don't know. What do you think? What be haunting things, right? Please pray for sleep and dizziness, ringing in left ear, throat, acid reflux. We did that one. Please pray for sleep and ringing in left ear. We did that. We did that. Okay. I can't believe that the comments kind of stopped. It's weird. Anyways, haunted. Wow. Well, we can pray for you for sure. That we can certainly do. Lord, Heavenly Father, we come to you today for Carrie. Lord, we just ask that that if there is any attachments or anything going on there that it's making her feel that there is some things that are maybe the way she describes it, Lord, is haunting her. Lord, whatever that is, that spirit, that entity, that whatever it may be, Lord, we just ask that you take it away. Lord, we I dare to say that we cast it away in Jesus' name. We ask that it be gone and removed from her. And Lord, that we just we ask that you heal any wounds, mental wounds, anything going on there with inside of Carrie, Lord, that makes her feel like that this is some type of feeling haunted. Lord, we just ask that you clear that up and make it right in Jesus' powerful, mighty, and amazing name. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. I don't know, I was getting something. I'm gonna be quiet. There's no, I get it. Hold on. Is it on here? One second, guys. So it's just, I get sometimes there's a Bible verse that was stuck, and sometimes you get little things when you pray, right? And so something came to mind there that Romans 10:13. I'm going to read from the NIV. I guess I could do let me do it from the King James. Romans 10:13. So Romans 10:13. Get your Bible ready. You might It's Romans 10:13. So I don't know why, but that sticks. I don't know why that verse would come out. Whatever. So it's Romans 10:13. It says, "For whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved." So I think just gotta call on Him and ask Him to help push it away. All right. Let's get back to our daily bread. Thanks for joining, Carrie. So, there we go. So, Ian, how are you doing, my friend? How are you doing? So, we read from the Our Daily Bread. Our Daily Bread is a free publication. You might be able to get it at your church. Take a look at that. If you go to the website, odb.org, you can get yourself your own electronic copy, or they'll send you a paper copy, or you can get it texted to you, or in the app, or on a Facebook Messenger, or I don't know, like countless numbers of ways that they send it to you. What's up, Josie? Thanks for joining. So, for today, Tuesday, October 15th, still October 15th in some parts of the viewing areas. The title is Haystack Prayers. So Samuel Mills and 4 of his friends often gathered together to pray for God to send more people to share the good news of Jesus. One day in 1806, after returning from their prayer meeting, they got caught in a thunderstorm, and they took refuge in a haystack. Their weekly prayer gathering then became known as the Haystack Prayer Meeting, which resulted in a global mission movement. Today, the Haystack Prayer Monument stands at Williams College in the U.S. as a reminder sorry. Here, let me start back with that one. Today, the Haystack Prayer Monument. No. Did it freeze? Alright, okay. So today, the Haystack Prayer Monument stands at Williams College in the U.S. as a reminder of what God can do through prayer. Edwin, who am I? You missed it. I played that song today. Our Heavenly Father is delighted when His children approach Him with a common request. It's like a family gathering where they're united in purpose, sharing a common burden. The Apostle Paul acknowledges how God helped him through the prayers of others during the time of severe suffering. He will continue to deliver us as you help us by your prayers. That one popped up, 2 Corinthians 10, 1 through 10. 1, 10 through 11. Apostles of God. Awesome. God has chosen to use our prayers, especially our prayers together, to accomplish His works in the world. No wonder the verse continues. Then many will give thanks and for the answer to the prayers of the many. Let's pray together so we can also rejoice together in God's goodness. Our loving Father is waiting for us to come to Him so He can work through us in ways that reach far beyond anything we could ever imagine. Amen. Amen. So what request can you and others pray for? And how has your faith been strengthened by or when you pray for others? When we pray together, we're working together. Today's reading was from 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 8 through 11. Key verse for today is 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 11. You help us by your prayers. That was today's word. Angels of God, a stage 7 in Orlando, Florida. And they said hi and... Oh, okay, cool. Cool. Angels of God. That's good stuff, brother. Alright. So... Sorry, I was a little bit distracted reading today, so... So guys, if you have any prayer requests, praise reports, anything like that, throw them in a chat stream. We'd love to pray for you, with you. Edwin's back in the house. Hey wife, how are you doing? The wife has shown up on Facebook. Any prayer requests, praise reports? Otherwise, we're going to shut it down. And hey, thanks for the like, Gulakan. Thank you so much. And thanks for the like. I don't even know how to say your guys' names. N-I-G-T-A. You saw 2 angels of God. At stage 7 in Orlando, Florida. And they said hi and shook your hand and then they left. Really? Wow. That's amazing, dude. That is amazing. Wow. That's a good story. That's definitely a good story, for sure. Roblox is in the house. Thank you so much for the like. I don't know how to say your name, and it's in Arabic, but I think it's Arabic. Looks like Arabic. Can you pray for God to deliver you and your family? Well, can we pray for Myri, high blood pressure and acid reflux? Sure. Absolutely. Lord, Heavenly Father, we lift up Warden's family today, Lord. We lift up Warden. Lord, we just ask that whatever may need to be working inside of his family, Lord, to draw them closer to you. Lord, help make a way. Lord, speak into their lives. Whisper in their ear. Let them feel your loving arms wrapped around them, and let them know that you are there, and that you are always there, and that there can be no other way but to be with you and to have that salvation, to take that grace and allow that to work through them and within them in their life. In Jesus' name, amen. Please pray for... Yes, we certainly can pray for your friend, as long as you're being... Sure can, hey. Alright, so, let's see, Warden, we pray for Warden, let's pray for Myri. I hope I'm saying her name right. Please pray for Dave. Stacy has cancer and his company is collapsing. Oh no, that's horrible. That's horrible. Lord, we lift up Myri tonight, Lord. We just ask for a healing for Myri, for this high blood pressure and the acid reflux, Lord, and the stomach pain. Lord, we just ask that you heal that, Lord, and allow her body to be healed and renewed. And Lord, most importantly, we just hope that Myri is knowing who you are, Lord, so that way when the time comes, Lord, that she will be received well by you, Lord. We ask this in your mighty and powerful Son's name, we pray. Amen. Pray for your friend Kyle. He's currently very sick and is in need of all the prayers right now. Lord, we lift up Hayes' friend Kyle. Lord, we don't know exactly what's going on with him. He says he's very sick. Lord, we just ask for healing in Jesus' name. Lord, we ask for healing for him to be healed from whatever that sickness is, Lord. And we just ask for those prayers to be directed towards him. Lord, we lift him up. We also lift up the family that may be surrounding his friend as well. Lord, and we ask that they give them strength and courage, and also for Kyle's friend here that asked for this prayer. Lift him up, Lord, and allow him to be able to see you in every bit of this, what's going on. Lord, we ask this in your mighty and powerful Son's name. We pray. Amen. Amen. Lord, we lift up Dave Stays, Lord. We don't like cancer. Cancer is a nasty one. Lord, we lift up Dave Stays, Lord. We just ask that it be healing in his body, Lord, and take that cancer away. Pull it out of his body in a way, Lord. We ask that there be a healing. Lord, we ask that there be supernatural healing, Lord, and allow that cancer to be shriveled up and gone. We ask this in Jesus' mighty and powerful name. We pray. Amen. Amen. Lord, we ask that his company be solidified and allow that company to be able to stay sustainable through the situations that are happening with his health. Lord, we ask this in your mighty and powerful Son's name. We pray. Amen. Amen. All right. And I wasn't going to broadcast tonight. People needed some prayers, right? Make sure you guys are praying too. Make sure you're praying. Make sure that you are praying for your friends, for your families. Pray for others. Lift them up. God wants to hear your heart. How else are you going to have that relationship with him if you don't talk to him? Yeah, the world might think, do I need any prayers? Yeah, I don't know, I guess just some wisdom for just some wisdom. I'm gonna leave it like that. God knows what we gotta do. So I definitely, but yeah, for my wife, for healing as well. Get this pain out of her knees. It's not good. So, alright. So we are, so just going to do a little reset. I'm Jason Wallace. I'm a believer and follower of Jesus Christ. I'm a prayer warrior, intercessor, Bible reader, devoted husband and father. And we broadcast on YouTube, YouNow, Live.me, DLive.io, Periscope, Facebook, Twitch, Smashcast. This is all simulcast, okay? It's all at the same time. Smashcast, FC2, Peaks, Mixer, Loots, InstaJib, Vaughn Live, Africa TV, OK.ru, and Kitty Live. And yeah, so we're trying to reach the lost in different areas. For those who may be English speaking or wanting to learn how to speak English in different areas. Some thoughts about that is FC2 is Asian community, so it's mostly Japan. What are we doing here? Africa TV is Korea. OK.ru is obviously Russia. So we're reaching in to try to, and same thing with Kitty Live. Kitty Live is mostly Asian countries as well. Jesus will show us what we're wrong and purify us. Show us what we're doing wrong and purify our hearts. Yeah. Amen. But he says in his word, right? If we're not, he says that, the greatest commandment is that we love the Lord our God with all of our mind, heart, and soul, right? So if we do that, so commandment, the greatest commandment, what is that? That's like, Is that Matthew 22? I don't remember where it is. Parable of the wedding feast. Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes. Which is the first commandment of all? So, Matthew 22:34. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. Then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him and saying, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in all the law?" And Jesus said to them, "You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and all of your mind. This is the first and great commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." So, we need to check ourselves and make sure that we're loving God. Make sure we're loving God, and make sure that we are loving our people around us, loving on people, not being such a bad person, right? We all need to work on that, myself included. So, if you can't answer those two questions, right? Do you love God with all your mind, heart, and your soul? And do you love your neighbor as yourself? If you can't say that, then we need to work on it, right? We need to work on that heart problem, right? We need to fix that heart problem. The only way to do that is to get into the Word and try to understand it better. You know, it's interesting. There was a question today, and it really made me think about it today too. I happened to hop on somebody's broadcast this morning just because I was driving into work, and I was like, "Oh, hey, this guy's on. I'm going to listen to him for a second." But I got on there, and a person asked a question. Go, well, explained a little bit about my story and about what Jesus has done to my life. And he says, "But wait, what's going on, AJ?" And he says, said something like, "Was your changes because of Jesus, or was it because of, whatever, I forget what it was, right? So you've been so numb emotionally." Yeah. I've been there. I've been there. And I slowly sink back to it every once in a while. Encouragement for you about falling into that. Yeah. John 1:9. So there's how about John 1:9? JOH. Did you know BLB is user support? Yes, I do. John 1:9. JR is back in the house. He wanted to, but he seems so numb. So, So if we go up a little bit, so John 1:1, King James. Let's go pull that up here. New King James. I'm trying to. My references here are totally missing right now. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I'm tired. But there is a true thought there that where does it go? think it's Ephesians 2, 8, and 9. EPH 2 colon 8. What's going on? Never ever quit. What's going on? Thanks for joining. I don't know, I'm digging into some Bible here, so yeah, here you go. So understand this, Warden. Listen to this one. Alright, this is really, this is kind of like right in there what it is. I want to go up into like Ephesians 2, 4. And we can start off with 2:1, I guess. So here we go. And you he made alive, who were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, and the Spirit, who now works in the sons of disobedience, among whom also we have once conducted ourselves in the lusts of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, just as others. But God, who is rich in mercy, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses. Right? You're dead, right? That's that whole hopeless feeling, that numb feeling, right? Made us alive together with Christ. So by grace, you have been saved. Right? And raised us up together and made us sit together in the heavenly places in Jesus Christ, that in the ages to come he might show the exceeding riches of his grace and his kindness towards us in Christ Jesus. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and not of yourselves. This is a gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast, right? For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand, that we should walk in them. It's very important, right? So even though we're going through stuff, even though we think we're not good enough, even though we think, I stumbled again, I did the same thing again, you are forgiven, right? And you're also, he loves you so much that he wants to see you do good, but you have to act on that, right? It's not just okay, I won't do it again, it's okay, I'm sorry, God, right? We gotta repent that, right? Whatever it is that's holding you back, you gotta repent that. You gotta get that stuff out. Do you want to try something? It's like a magic. I really don't believe in magic so much. Magic is kind of like trickery, right? We don't really do that. We are enough because God said we are, and through his love is where we are in his likeness. Yep. That's some good words there. And we have to, total viewers 50, thanks so much. Born confused, thanks, so was I. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know, whatever's holding you back, friend, we need to pray for that. Vanessa Henry, thanks so much for joining. you became a fan. Thanks so much. That's awesome. Appreciate that. Hopefully you can hear me. Sometimes people can't hear me. Bams. What's going on, friend? Minister Don Brown. How are you doing, my friend? How are you doing? Got all kinds of people come into the broadcast tonight. All kinds of visitors. Some old friends, some new friends. Thanks so much for being here. So, I'm getting a bit tired. It's 12:35 on the East Coast. It's Jay Slay, Chosen One, just in case you forgot. But you can change your name and I get all confused, man. Am I following you? Am I following? Yeah, I'm following this one. The one you love. Alright, now I see the picture. Yeah. We gotta sing that song, Jay. We gotta sing that song. Thank God all is well. Absolutely. Thank God all is well. But yeah, so it's tired time. Truth is, I'm tired. I'm gonna sing that song. I found out what the song that is. I found somebody here. This is your backup account. Plan on getting blocked for some reason. Waiting for the persecution to fall. Thank you for what you're doing. Your work is not in vain. You know, that's confirmation because sometimes I don't feel like it's making an impact. And then I have someone like yourself or other people come on and they encourage what we're doing. And I'm trying to bring truth and not crazy religious stuff, you know, if I can kind of understand that. You know, I'm just trying to help bring the word and present it and let people receive it, right? What the word says plainly, you know, I'm not trying to make up, you know, using it in a way that it would twist the words or anything. So this is why I'm very cautious when I pray about things for people, because there is sometimes some wrong ways of presenting your prayer, right, to God, and not that it's a wrong way, but it's not I don't know how to say it. It's just not presenting it well, you know. It attracts not only the people, but also spirit. I've heard that too. So, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I do appreciate that, and that is received. That is received. Thank you. So, we're going to be doing a group broadcast. Oh, that's next weekend. The 26th, Saturday 26th. Hopefully I can make it. This one's going to be a tough one. And I hope I just spelled it right, because if not, I'm going to be really, really mad at myself. October 26th. Yep. So, next weekend, we are going to be broadcasting on the Jesus Did It account. So make sure you're following the Jesus Did It account. The at Jesus Did It TV accounts on Facebook and on Periscope. Alright. Thank you so much, Jay. What's going on, Icy Cashew or Icky Cashew? What was I saying? Oh yeah, so the monthly broadcast. So make sure you like the underwater background. Yeah, that one's pretty cool, huh? It makes my CPU go crazy because I only got a stinking i5 core duo. What was that? Might be a core duo, maybe. I don't know. It's older than dirt, but it works. Seems like you just did a group broadcast. I know, right? It just seems like we just did it. I'm saying a word of prayer right now. Rest each shoulder. By the way, you're on the east side as well. You're on the east side as well. Oh, wait a minute. You're in Buffalo? You're from Buffalo? Where are you from? Well, I'll have to go check out You're from Buffalo. That'd be cool. We can meet up sometime. Used to go to church on the east side of Buffalo. You're on the east side as well. Whatever that means. Unless I'm getting it confused with maybe it's saying, oh, you're from Brooklyn. So you're on the other side of the state. You're on the other side of the state. But, Brooklyn. Is the JDI broadcast on Twitch? Unfortunately, not yet. I do all the technology for our, you know what, that's a really good question. Maybe I ought to work on that. Maybe you just kicked my butt there, Icky Cashew. Maybe I should do it. The issue, the only technical issue we have with doing a lot of different broadcasts is that when you have 4 or 5 people doing a broadcast, sometimes it's hard for them to watch all of the different streams, chats. So, yeah, that's the only difficulty we have right now. So, Kato Bill's in the house. Thanks so much for joining, Kato Bill. But the monthly Jesus Did It broadcast, we're going to be doing topic is on suicide this month, and this one's going to hit home with a bunch of us for sure. So we want to make sure that it's going to be a good discussion. So Saturday 26th at 6:30. You want to catch it on Facebook Live or on Periscope. Remember, you don't have to have Periscope in order to, what is the broadcast on originally? What is the broadcast on originally? What's up, Kato Bill? I'm not sure what your question is. Like this broadcast? My broadcast? Or the one that we're talking about, the monthly broadcast? Monthly broadcast is like a topic. So we pick a topic and we discuss it during a monthly broadcast. So we pick a day, we come on as the group of us and we have a discussion about it. And sometimes we bring people into the call, sometimes we do different things, and so it is an important and good topic, especially when we're starting to creep into those holiday times, and that's when people get the most depressed and things like that. So it's very important that we do that. So what is the JDI broadcast on? Like what platform? What is the JDI broadcast on? Like what platform? It's on Facebook and Periscope, if that's what you mean. And we are non-denominational, if that's what you mean. Non-denominational. So our group is non-denominational, even though our members do go to different denominations. So there's like 4 of us right now, and we have different our different views. We bring that information in to the broadcast, and we all discuss the particular topic. And so, like I said, that's kind of what it is. So that's what our original is. So, I'm getting tired. I'm starting to babble. So it's time to shut it down. So let's pray on out of this broadcast, and let's bring an end to this day. Alrighty. Lord Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this amazing time that you allowed us to be able to be here, to lift up fellow believers, and those who may not believe yet. Lord, we just lift them up to you. Lord, we thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to be able to pray for other people, to be able to encourage other people, to be able to bring your word and present it to other people, so that your name can get dispersed through the masses so people know, or at least hear your name, so that way they can be intrigued and want to learn more about you and what you have done in other people's lives. Lord, we just thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to lift up your name and to be able to praise you and worship you. Lord, we just thank you for each and every single person who came on the broadcast today. Lord, I just ask that you bring blessings upon their lives. Lord, I just ask this in your mighty and powerful Son's name we pray. Amen and amen. Despite that's right. That's right. We come under exactly. I know this sounds silly, but your dog has since jumped out of your window and has died. Lovely prayer. And lovely prayer. Thank you so much. Well, listen, we can pray for you. We can't really pray for the dog because if he's gone, he's unfortunately gone. But the Lord said that we are to take care of the animals, right? So why not pray for, our animals when they're sick? But I mean, obviously, if he's not here anymore, we can't necessarily pray for him, but we can certainly pray for you. So, Lord, we lift up, I'm not sure what Icky's real name is, Lord, but you know what Icky's name is, his real name. Lord, we just lift him up tonight, him or her. I'm making a judgment that you're a female or you're a male, but maybe you're a female. I don't know. Lord, we lift up this person, and we just ask that you bring some comfort to them, Lord, as losing a very cherished friend, and some people even call them family members, Lord. Lord, we know that we become attached to the animals, and you put the animals here to be able to have us be able to be responsible for the animals that are in this world. And Lord, we know that you put like animals like dogs and cats to be able to comfort us and be able to be companions to those who may have struggles with companionship of other humans, Lord. So Lord, we just thank you so much for the great time. Lord, we just ask that you allow the memories of all the great times that happened with Icky's dog, Lord. And we just ask that you continue to bring that person into a place where they are comforted in peace. In Jesus' mighty and powerful name, we pray. Amen. Listen, we'll pray. We pray. Absolutely, we pray. So, we're going to go out on a song like we always do, because that's what we do. We go out on songs because it's what we do. So, song for tonight. Going out. I'm going to play a I'm going to play a song that is not a you lost your dog yesterday. Right now you're 21, your dog Jack was a big part of your family. Hey, no problem, man. Listen, I understand. I lost my dog when I was like 14 or 15 years old, and I wasn't home when I couldn't say goodbye to he was my friend. That dog was my friend. I don't care what anybody says. That dog was my friend. He was there with me all the time. And I was away at my aunt's cabin, and I got a phone call from my mom, and they said, yeah, we have to put, the dog's name was Tippy, so Tippy's gonna have to go be put to sleep because it just wasn't doing well, and had some seizure and lost like a lot of his functionalities, and so I had to say goodbye to my friend through the phone. That hurt for a while. That was not good. It's a good thing I was in the country, up in the woods. I just went out in the woods and cried, and thought about all the good times. I mean, that dog was with me since I was like little, like 4. So that dog lived a long life, 15, 16 years or something like that. So I'm going to dare to do this. I'm going to play one of the songs that I sang. It's not a Christian song, so please do not send emails about how I didn't play a Christian song. Right? Listen, we are to enjoy music, right? And as long as it's not condemning God, as long as it's not going against God, we really should enjoy music as well, right? So this song was done with another person. I will play a Christian song next, but I want you guys to hear this song because it's very interesting, the words, and I'm going to play another Christian song after, so understand that. I love you guys. Listen, Jesus loves you. Understand that. And just know that He wants you to be in a relationship with Him. He wants you to talk to Him. Doesn't have to be getting on your knees and like this at the foot of your bed. Yeah, that's good. You can do that. Absolutely. I'm not saying you can't. But you can just start a conversation, right? Start a conversation with God. Say, God, thank you for that. Thank you for that. You know when bad stuff happens, you're like, thank you for that coffee cup spilling, because then I wasn't involved with an accident up ahead because I had to stop and clean it up, right? Think about that stuff. Think about it. All right? I love you guys. Get some rest. Be blessed. Know that Jesus loves you. And we'll see you the next time we broadcast. I'm guessing probably Thursday, because tomorrow's kind of a busy day, church day. So, all right. I love you guys. Get some rest. Be blessed. And like I said, know that Jesus Christ loves you. All right. Take it easy, guys. Here's our song. All right. Don't send me no emails about how I didn't play Christian stuff, okay? Don't get upset. Here you go.
When you try your best but you don't succeed, when you get what you want but not what you need, when you feel so tired but you can't sleep, stuck in reverse,
and the tears come streaming down your face when you lose something you can't replace, when you love someone but it goes to waste. What could be worse?
lights will guide you home
And ignite your bones,
and I will try to fix you. And high up above and down below,
when you're too in love to let it go. But if you never try, you'll never know just what you're worth. Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones. I will try to fix you.
When I walk through deep waters, I know that you will be with me.
When I'm standing in the fire, I will not be overcome.
Through the valley of the shadow, I will not fear. I am not alone.
I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone.
No, I am not alone.
You will go before me. You will never leave me. In the midst of deep sorrow, I see your light is breaking through.
The dark of night will not overtake me. I am pressing into you.
Lord, you fight my every battle,
And I will not fear. I am not alone.
I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone.
No, I am not alone.
You will go before me. You will never leave me. You amaze me,
Redeem me.
you call me as your own.
You amaze me.
Redeem me, you call me as your own. You amaze me,
Redeem me.
you call me as your own.
You amaze me.
You redeem me, you call me as your own.
You're my strength. You're my defender.
You're my refuge in the storm.
Through these trials, you've always been faithful.
You bring healing to my soul. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone.
No, I am not alone.
You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone.
No, I am not alone.
You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone.
I am not alone.
You will go before me. You will never leave me.
Thank you. Thanks for singing with me.
Thank you, brother.